We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Planet Holyrood, the podcast debating all the big stories this week in Scottish politics. I'm Chris McCall. I'm the Deputy Political Editor at the Daily Record, and I'm standing in as host this week as Paul Hutchin is busy searching for stories from his sun lounger in Ibiza. Now, joining me today are two of my esteemed colleagues. We have Douglas Dickey, the content editor at the Scottish Daily Express, and Hannah Roger, the political editor at the Sunday Mail. Now, a short while before we began recording today, John Swinney was asked about one of the big stories of the day. Now, of course,
shows you how slow news a day this is when this is one of the big stories of the day.
It is July and we are in recess, so things are quieter on the Holyrood front, it's fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
But on the music scene, it was busy in Glasgow last night. There were lots of big things happening, including Kneecap's sold-out show in Glasgow at the Academy, where John Swinney got a call-out from the band on stage. Now, you may recall that Kneecap were dropped from the Transmit Festival, which takes place this weekend at Glasgow Green. They were one of the most anticipated sets, but the promoters dropped them after there was something of a backlash against Kneecap's various comments at several gigs in recent months. And no less a figure than John Swinney stepped in and said that they shouldn't be playing at Transmit, which didn't go down too well with Kneecap last night, who asked the crowd, "What's your First Minister's name?" before adding, "They stopped us playing Transmit, but they can't stop us playing Glasgow." Now, John Swinney was asked about this today, and he said, and I'll quote, "I think the most important thing at this moment is that we all focus on the issue that Kneecap are concerned about, which is the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza." And he added, "What I'd say is the last thing I want to be commenting on is bands. I want people to enjoy their music and make their choices." Now, Dougie, you strike me as a massive Kneecap fan.
Yeah, big.
Can the First Minister really say that, he doesn't want to be commenting on bands, given that a few days ago he was basically saying Kneecap shouldn't be playing Transmit in the first place?
Oh, I think he's just probably trying to draw a line under it. I'm kind of loath to give Kneecap any more publicity than they've already got, especially for a band who I don't even think they've had a top 40 album in the UK. Yeah, they've kind of dominated.
I feel like that's not really the
headline.
yardstick of good music these days.
Oh no, I'm not saying. I'm not. We're not here to discuss their music.
Maybe we are.
It's certainly not, but it should be a yardstick of their popularity, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I think they must be. Kneecap's promoter must be grinning from year to year for the publicity they've had in the past few weeks. The way they've been able to kind of turn things round. Swinney made his comments. I was quite surprised that he kind of waded into it. It felt a bit like almost beneath kind of politicians, and yet Keir Starmer's get involved with it. And I know there was the stuff about the kind of alleged comments about killing your Tory MP. I actually think, Chris, Hannah, I don't know what you guys think, but the main reason why putting Kneecap on at Transmit could have been seen as a public, a kind of public disorder risk. It's actually got nothing to do with their views on Israel, other views on Middle East, other views on Hamas, other views on Hezbollah, and it's got everything to do with the fact that, and we've seen it last night, by all accounts, it was effectively a Celtic fan convention, and then you're putting that into.
I'm sure everyone is welcome.
Well, they did say, myself as a Rangers fan, working class Rangers fan, I like to think, I'm welcome there in the spirit of working class solidarity. But if you move that, transport that from the Glasgow Academy to Glasgow Green Transmit, I think it was a recipe for trouble. I'm not a big fan of banning bands from playing. No issue with their gig last night. If they want to put on a gig and say what they say on stage, that's kind of, but I can understand why Transmit made the decision they did, but then maybe they shouldn't put them in a bill in the first place, and it's become this big
but they're like, I think obviously they were put on the bill way before, not obviously their views on, like Irish nationalism, etc., were well known, but they hadn't really ramped up the whole kind of Gaza anti-Israel stuff probably at the point that they were booked for Transmit, and then it was all kind of exploded since then. But I get your point on the sort of sectarian potential for sectarian sort of
I should
violence.
add for balance that Kneecap told the crowd at the Academy last night that, quote, they had more in common with a poor Rangers fan than a rich Celtic fan, as they called a working class unity.
They also
Just to make you feel better about it.
They also called Rangers fans smelly. So,
but that is actually true.
Well,
I mean, I'm sitting next to you.
I think I smell delightful right now. But look, it's just in some ways, it's such a niche argument, but it's kind of blown up. I mean, Kneecap must be absolutely over the moon.
Yeah.
With all this
publicity. I think, back to your original point, Chris, I think it's a bit rich of John Swinney to say what he said today, given that he did wade in and kind of say, oh yes, they should be banned, which was a pretty naive thing to do in the first place. But now he's being asked to sort of justify his original response and expand on it, and now suddenly he's like, oh, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, as First Minister, he is going to get asked about all kinds of things going on in the wider world that he personally probably doesn't have that much of a view on. But I do think, it's always a risk when senior politicians get asked about bans. I mean, we all remember the infamous Gordon Brown quote about the Arctic monkeys, which Brown may not have ever actually said, but people do now remember him for it. But I think on the Transmit stuff, I mean, John Swinney had a clear get out when he could have just said, this is an issue for, number one, the promoters, and number two, an issue for the police who advise, the council who work with the promoters. He didn't have to give a view, but he chose to give a view.
I think maybe the problem with that at the time was there was the stuff about the, kill your MP.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of made it, maybe
but you can condemn that without saying they should be banned from a particular gig.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, actually. I personally don't think... I don't agree with banning. I just think it's a silly thing to do.
I don't think that. I mean, I think it's important to note, though, that they're not banned. Not only are they not banned, but they take public taxpayer money, from the UK government to kind of fund their activities, or have done in the past. They're not banned. They're not cancelled. It was just that Transmit decided a bit late in the day, maybe, that putting them on was probably risking, maybe risking their license, because of the potential for. Clashes. That's why, but they're not banned. I mean, they played last night, so
no, but they were banned from Transmit.
I'm sure if they bought tickets, they'd be made to feel welcome.
Yeah, it was a big night in Glasgow though last night for music. I was at Kendrick Lamar.
Did he mention John Swinney on stage at all?
Unfortunately not. SZA didn't mention John Swinney either.
Did he say Rangers fans were welcome at his gig and Celtic fans?
He actually said Rangers fans stink to high heaven.
Oh well.
Sorry.
Another one that needs his I could hear Kendrick Lamar from I was going to say my front room to look cooler, but it was actually from my bed when I was in bed. Pounding away. So,
and then Billie Eilish was playing as well.
She was at the Hydro, and we don't as yet know her views on the SNP government.
Or the scent of Rangers fans.
if any Billie Eilish fans out there want to get in touch and tell us what she thinks on devolution and the Holyrood election next year, we'll be all ears.
Yeah.
Moving on, the one man who very much is a fan of Kneecap is Jeremy Corbyn, who has been pictured with the band in the past outside his son's shop, I believe, in North London.
Oh yeah, I used to live just up the road from that shop.
Is it a hemp shop? Am I saying something like that?
It's I think it's called the National Hemp Service.
Wow.
Were you a regular shopper?
No, I just my bus when I was going into Westminster used to go past it, and there was a bus stop right outside, and I remember seeing, I was like, that's a weird shop, and I googled it and realised it was Jeremy Corbyn's son's shop.
Indeed. So there's a nice plug for that business if any listeners in North London are looking for hemp supplies. But so Jeremy Corbyn, if you had managed to forget, he was officially booted out of Labour last year before the general election. He'd been suspended by the party for quite a while before that, but he ran as an independent in his Islington constituency, and he won anyway, and is now in discussions about launching a brand new party. Now, at the time of recording, we don't know what this party will be called. We don't know when it'll be officially launched. And
We don't know who the leaders are going to be.
We don't know who the leader will be, yes. Very, very fair point.
Do you think, sorry to interrupt, right, but I've just thought of something. Do you think Fergus Ewing could be Scotland's Jeremy Corbyn?
That's something I hadn't considered before. I'd
I
like
mean,
to hear what Fergus said in that, rather than me speculating on it. But I mean, the
he's
similarities
running
are
as
endless, aren't they?
independent. He could get elected. Maybe he'll start his own party with like Chris McClenny or something. I think he's looking for a new party to join.
Well, we'll come back to Fergus because I have to ask you, Hannah.
What?
The big question is that in 2025 and, more to the point in 2026 when the election is next year, do enough Scots still care about Jeremy Corbyn for his party to be anything, his new party, if it happens, for it to be anything more than a noisy group of activists?
Yeah, it's a tough one to see what effect it would actually have in Scotland. For a start, obviously, it needs to get off the ground and they need to stop fighting with each other internally about who's going to run it and who's been removed from a WhatsApp group and all this nonsense. But I see it as more like a sort of lefty London thing rather than, impacting as far as Scotland. Obviously, it depends if they did have, some high-profile members from Labour who go to it in Scotland. There's a couple of people that I could think of who may wish to join.
Brian Wishman.
Come on now. You mean Sunday Mail columnist Brian Leishman? There's a couple of people I can think off the top of my head, either, former Labour politicians who are not elected at the moment who might go for it, but
one former Labour leader up here,
maybe, perhaps, yeah. But I still can't really see it taking much away from Scottish Labour in the Holyrood vote, or even sort of the lefter parties like the Greens or some parts of the SNP. I think, to me, it's more of a lefty London issue.
Now, you'll be big fans of Corbyn on the Scottish Daily Express. Dougie, what's your impartial view on the electoral chances of this fledgling movement, if it indeed happens?
I mean, I don't think their electoral chances are very high, other than Jeremy Corbyn himself, who obviously is quite a large personal following in his constituency.
And rightly so, I would say. He has actually done some decent stuff.
I mean,
in
he's,
the area.
if there's what, if there's one thing you can say about Jeremy Corbyn is he is a conviction politician at a time. Now, you might not agree with his convictions, but he's a conviction politician at a time when there's very few conviction politicians out there. But you asked Hannah, does Scotland care enough about Jeremy Corbyn anymore? Has Scotland never cared about Jeremy Corbyn? I think you're absolutely right. This is a London-centric thing. I don't think, other than Corbyn himself, I don't think he'll ever win a seat in either in Scotland or in the general election 2029. But in 2029, they might. I mean, it's a long time away. But if the general election were tomorrow, they might have an impact in some constituencies where they might take enough votes off Labour to let someone else in. It would likely be reform. That's the kind of irony of it. But up here, I don't think they'll make. I mean, we've already seen, what happens with Alba. You create this brand new party headed by effectively one person, kind of pushing it on, and they've done absolutely nothing. Alba have done nothing, and they're going to do nothing next year. It's hard to kind of create that. I mean, even though Reform's a relatively new party, to be honest, it was kind of born out of Newcap, and it's been Nigel Farage himself has been about for years and years and years. So it's very difficult to create something from nothing in such a short space of time. And I can't see. I don't know if they'll stand MD next year, and I can't see them winning. Even come
no,
close
I
to
doubt
winning
they would have
seat.
any candidates for Holyrood, given that they don't. I mean, don't have a name and probably don't have a lot of money either. I think one thing it does tell us is the sort of state of the Labour Party. This really is like the left sort of cleaving itself away from Labour under Keir Starmer, and I'm not particularly surprised given his recent sort of
at
policies.
the same time. I think what we'll find is a lot of people who are maybe uber critical of Labour, within the party and the direction it's taking. They're also realistic, and they know their chances of being elected on another platform are pretty low. So, you've seen it. Is there going to be widespread defections? I just can't see it.
We should add that John McDonnell, who was obviously Corbyn's right-hand man when he was Labour leader, has already ruled himself out of joining. And the group of left MPs, from what we hear so far, nobody's really good. I mean, you might have heard differently than me, Hannah, but it doesn't seem to be any obvious big-name defections that would be on the agenda.
No.
Which, if you are a new party and all the problems that you described, okay, you really need to get attention in the media. You need to get people's attention, because especially in a general election, when you're faced with a ballot paper with a list of parties, the majority of voters will vote by party. If they see the Labour box, they see the Lib Dem box, whatever, they put their X there. If they see the name of a party, even if they've heard it on the TV a few times, they probably aren't going to choose it. Apart from, as you say, Corbyn himself, who has a massive personal vote in his constituency, but that's through 45 years of hard-won respect. So personally speaking, I mean, I do, if they do field candidates, I would imagine they'll do better than, I don't know if you remember, in 2016 we had Rise, who were a left-wing coalition who did absolutely nothing.
But wait, that's just like a blast from the past. Like who was in that? What prompted this? Was it when everyone left the
I think there was the Radical Independence Convention, which kind of sprang up in 2014, which kind of brought together elements of the old, like, Scottish Socialist Party, Communist Party, that kind of thing. And there were a few people who had quite big social media followings at the time. And I think they maybe somewhat naively thought that would transcend into popular support in an election. And needless to say, it did not. But that's enough history lessons on the far left of Scottish politics. But
do you think that, just like, Elon Musk is starting a political party as well. Do you think this is like the new version of starting a podcast?
Well, maybe we should start our own political party.
No, what would it be called?
Starting another podcast. There was like, got Planet Holyrood. I mean, you can look to Europe. Look at Italy. There are examples of formerly quite staid, dull, multi-party systems where a new party rises. Italy had, is it the 5-star movement? It's kind of their version of reform. Any Italian listeners, feel free to question whether my take is right or not, but it can happen. But as you say, it's difficult. The cards are stacked against you in the UK political system. And
I think as well that probably realistically they're a bit a single issue party. Other than Corbyn himself, it's going to be very much dominated by Gaza. And come general election time, come Scottish election time, who knows what the situation there will be. So I just think I think it's a bit it's going to be a bit of a non-event.
Okay. On the issue of the election next year, one party that current polls suggest could do better than they have done before and return maybe 15 MSPs, 12 MSPs, but the Scottish Greens, who are currently, they're just opening a sort of summer of elections involving their membership, because the Greens allow their members to vote on absolutely everything. The Greens love an internal election. So I think they're voting firstly on who should be candidates, and then after that there'll be a vote on who the party's co-leader should be. And that's important because for the first time in how many years? 15 years? Patrick Harvey will not be standing. He's not leaving Holyrood. He will stand as a candidate, or he plans to stand as a candidate, because he does face a challenge.
Got some challenges.
He does. But he hopes to hang around Holyrood as an MSP, but he will not be leading the party. And we're expecting this week that Ross Greer, who's obviously probably the best on Green MSP, out with leadership. We expect him to launch his leadership campaign. And I would suggest that he's probably odds on to get elected as one of the two co-leaders.
God help us.
So Hannah, who else, apart from Greer, who else can we expect to see take up the top job in environmental politics in Scotland?
What, you mean in the Green Party?
Well, yes, the Green Party.
Well, there was lots of chat about Gillian Mackay, but then she has had a baby recently, and I'm not sure if that might have, I know before she went off on maternity leave, she was still very kind of keen or at least that's what was being briefed as, like, she was considering going for this role. But obviously when you have a kid, like, that kind of changes your perspective.
Of course.
So not sure if she's still intent on that. Lorna Slater, the last time I checked, was also planning to put herself forward again. Has that changed?
I believe not. I believe she will be standing.
Yeah. But I do expect to see some of the more grassroots members, because one of the things with the Scottish Greens is, at least, from my reporting and what I've been picking up, is there's a real disparity between the parliamentary group and the ordinary members, and it's almost seen as, there's just a big divide between those two groups. And I think that the grassroots members, the ordinary members, feel a bit like dictated to, and as you say, they love an internal election, they love a vote on things.
They do.
I think that ordinary members feel as if a lot of decisions are just being made without their say-so. And that's why I find it quite interesting. There's like a slate of candidates who are standing against Patrick Harvey to be the candidate for his sort of
the Glasgow region, I believe.
Because I think it's part of this sort of effort to essentially take out the existing parliamentary group. I'm not sure Maggie Chapman, I don't know if she's said anything yet.
Not to my knowledge.
But I think she was considering it anyway last time I spoke to her. But, obviously she might have decided against it. But I think it will be quite interesting to see what happens. And I don't imagine Lorna Slater will be successful, but it is the Green Party, so you never know.
Dougie, do you think that after the election next year we'll be in a scenario where the Greens are once again the kingmakers? Could the Greens be propping up an SNP minority government?
It's perfectly plausible.
Would you welcome
imagine that? Imagine Ross Greer propping up the SNP government.
It baffles me that people look at the last 5 years with the Greens and think, oh yeah, I'll have a bit of that. It really, I still think the story of the Greens is one of the real missed opportunities in Scottish politics.
Yeah.
I know I think we've clashed before in this, Hannah, but to me they're not an environmental party anymore. It seems like that's almost, from the outside to me it appears to be such a small part of their kind of MO these days, and I think
it's a smaller part.
Yeah, and I think we could, at time we could do with that. I don't understand why we need to take such a firm position, because all they're doing is alienating potential voters by taking such a firm position on things like the Constitution, which has got nothing to do with environmental issues. It's got absolutely nothing to do with it. There's no justification. By all means, party members can have their views, and yet they seem to get drawn in and bogged down with these kind of fringe issues, the gender stuff. And no, I'm not saying, I'm not here to debate it. I'm just saying that it's something that they've been kind of dragged down with. Yeah. And I think, I also think the Holyrood arithmetic, I'm not convinced that they're going to win 15 seats, because Reform are going to hoover up a bunch of, or probably going to hoover up a bunch of list seats. And that's going to impact on the Greens, because it knocks you down the kind of pecking order. If you add, okay, the Greens might be polling at 12% on the list vote, for example, but if Reform are polling at 13% on the list vote, then that's going to bump you down. Yeah. So I'm not convinced by the numbers I'm hearing for it. But look, it could be the Greens also haven't ruled out propping up a Labour, a potential Labour administration, which I think was one of their better moves in the past few years, to say that we would be open to that. So it's perfectly plausible. Whether they could work under Swinney, who's obviously, he's no Humza Yousaf, who was very aligned with the Greens in a lot of issues. Who knows? But I mean, Ross Greer is a minister. Wow. Minister Greer. Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I just wanted to mention that while we've been recording this, the Press Association have put out that Police Scotland is preparing for a potential visit from Donald Trump, quote, later this month. So we could see the Donald
I thought that was cancelled.
Well, not according to Police Scotland.
Oh no, it was the state visit.
State visit. So the state visit had been talked about in September.
Yeah.
But this, I believe this would be a visit to his golf clubs, basically.
Well, who's paying for that bill? That's what I want to know.
So there's one question.
Donald,
so apparently you
phone
can't
in,
book,
let us know.
if you can't book a round at the moment at Turnberry between July 24th and July 28th. I know you're all desperate to get on the greens there.
Oh, I'm desperate to get on the greens here, let me tell you, but I'm not paying
To play golf.
I'm a big golfer, yeah.
Really?
Yes,
Oh,
so.
do you know who else is a big golfer?
Who?
Andy Murray.
Yes, I've seen that in Carlos Alcaraz, actually.
Yeah.
Although I've got a better handicap than both of them, so.
Maybe you should do that. Andy Murray, please challenge Dougie.
Yeah, I'm
to get
challenging
round
you,
the ball.
Andy. If you're watching, I'll take you on anytime.
Yeah.
So just quickly, what kind of reception can Donald Trump expect in Scotland? I mean, we'll remember Jenny Godley's pictures down at Turnberry back in his first term as president. Can we expect
Trump is a C word.
I think he'll be here to open his new course, actually. I think that's what it'll be.
So go to Turnberry, we expect him to go to Aberdeenshire as well to open another course. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to. I think there'll be protests. I think some people will be quite happy probably to see him here. A lot of people will be unhappy, and the vast majority will probably shrug their shoulders, especially as it's a non kind of be a bit different if it was a state visit. That might spark a bit more interest. But I think the fact that he's over here to look at his business interests probably will lessen any kind of angry reaction to it.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
I think, though, on a kind of a slightly side note, I think that he is less unpopular this time than he was last time.
I would agree with that.
Even though I feel like he is more mental this time. In terms of like, he's like Trump 2.0, where he's meddling on the global stage and creating kind of little wars here and there and trying to get this Nobel Peace Prize. And I just think he's so kind of erratic, but yet people aren't as mad with him as last time.
Weariness to the relentless Trump news. I think a lot of people kind of choose to tune out. I mean, there are some things that you can't ignore, like bombing Iran, to name but one. But I think
that again.
No, let's not discuss that again.
On that note, I want to say thanks very much to Hannah and Dougie for joining me. And I should say you can listen to this episode of Planet Holyrood on Spotify or Apple Music. Watch it on the Daily Record YouTube channel. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram or TikTok for the latest news and the best bits of the podcast. So goodbye for just now.
We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.